Colin Powell died after living a life of riches and luxury in his 80s, never having seen any justice for the masses of despicable crimes that he has committed. Not really anything to celebrate about that. And I'm not saying that because he's not an awful person. He absolutely was an abominable piece of shit who murdered hundreds of thousands at the very least. But he was never brought to justice. Right? A lot of people seem to think, or seem to be eulogizing Colin Powell. Mr. Iraq War, Mr. Iran-Contra, Mr. Cover-Up the My Massacre is being eulogized as some sort of trailblazing figure for black excellence or something, I guess, which is very interesting. So if you're a bit young, you're one of the Zoomers, Colin Powell gave a speech where he explicitly lied, saying, oh, this is evidence of this vial here is evidence of Iraq's, I think it was chemical weapons or weapons of mass destruction or something, and just completely made shit up knowingly to justify the invasion of Iraq, which then resulted in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people at the very least, possibly more than 1 million. Hundreds of thousands at the very least. He was also intimately involved in Iran-Contra. He was involved in the US military's cover-up of the My Lai massacre in Vietnam. All around a fucking awful person. He was basically the Heinrich Himmler of the US during the George Bush era. An absolutely abominable, terrible person who in a just world would have died in a shitty prison cell rather than in luxury due to complications caused from multiple diseases that he had as a result of old age. But that didn't happen, unfortunately. And, people all came out ready to eulogize Colin fucking Powell. Rest in power, Colin Powell. The worst one was from I think it was a black Democratic political candidate. Let's see if I can find it. This guy, Jamal Bowman. I never heard of him before, but as a black man just trying to figure out the world, Colin Powell was an inspiration. An inspiration for what? Did you also want to mass murder brown people? Did you want to invade their countries and steal their resources and murder their children? Is that why he was an inspiration for you? He was from NYC, went to City College, and rose to the highest ranks of our nation. It's not see, this is the problem with liberals and these sorts of people. They think that having personal achievements in formal politics is a good thing. It's not. It's not by itself. Being a president is not a good thing. It doesn't mean that you're personally a high achiever or anything. Whether you do anything good in a high position like Secretary of State of the USA, for example, depends on what you fucking do, not the mere fact that you got there. And this is completely depoliticized, right? He's completely depoliticized what the Secretary of State does. And it's not we're not talking about he was a poor boy who rose to to be the best soccer player in the entire world or something like that. We're talking about the Secretary of State of the United States. The Secretary of State of the United States is basically one of the most powerful people in the US government when it comes to the US states' actions regarding other countries, when it comes to generally the way they act upon other countries. And he was one of the worst of all time, okay? One of the worst of all time. And that's saying a lot because the US, every single Secretary of State of the US has been a callous war criminal. And this guy has depoliticized that fact, has depoliticized what that position actually does to just say he rose to the highest ranks of our nation, nothing more, nothing less. He had a high rank, automatically good. You can use the same logic to eulogize fucking Adolf Hitler. I didn't agree with Adolf Hitler and everything, but no one can say that he didn't rise to high ranks and achieve his dreams. No one can take that away from him, right? It's the same empty fucking rhetoric. Out of all the people in the George W. Bush government most responsible for the Iraq War, there's Bush, Cheney, Powell. All together, all three of those, the three main ideological authors of the Iraq War that killed hundreds of thousands of people. And this fucking guy has disconnected that to just make it a sort of a woke eulogy, a very individualistic woke eulogy, right? He came from nothing. He was just trying to figure out the world. And he became the Secretary of State. It's depoliticizing what people do. This is what liberals want. You need to be careful of this because this is what liberals want. They want to depoliticize this sort of woke rhetoric. They want to make it out as long as you're a high achiever, it doesn't particularly matter about the details of what that high achieving actually entails. Sending love, strength, and prayer to the family and friends of Secretary Powell. I mean, most of those people are also awful, abominable human beings too. And then rest in power, sir. Rest in power is a phrase that should have been retired long ago, but this is definitively the end of it, if it wasn't already dead. Just look at that. Rest in power. Absolutely incredible stuff there. Like, what do I even say about it, right? Like, as something to be analyzed, all that I can really say is what I just said. It's lauding like the sort of meritocracy above everything, right? Like, it doesn't particularly matter how much of a heinous criminal that someone was, as long as, you know, they achieve the right to do their heinous crimes through their own personal merit, which apparently, according to this guy, Colin Powell did. That's liberalism for you. It's like, you know, when people argued, for example, that Hillary Clinton was the most qualified candidate for the US presidency. What made her qualified? Well, she held some positions in the US government, especially during Obama's term, 2 terms, where she did heinous criminal shit constantly. Ergo, she's qualified. That's how it works. It doesn't matter. Like, the content of what the people actually do doesn't matter. All that matters is that they had like important titles. Nothing more, nothing less. These are the kinds of people who would have voted for Adolf Hitler for Times Man of the Year. Like, honestly, just so disconnected from anything to do with reality, anything to do with their actual actions, their actual crimes. And if you want to know, like, the Iraq War death toll was 500,000 as a direct result of the invasion, bare minimum. Every single one of those is attributable. Every single one is attributable to situations caused by the USA. Every single one. You know, from the people who directly died, violent deaths, to the people who starved because supply lines and the economy was destroyed, to the people who took up arms against the US occupiers. Every single one of those people would not have died if not for the US invasion. Every single death is their fault. Lied, and Powell was... Honestly, I think he was the most public liar. I could be misremembering, but I do remember him being the most public liar. Like, he was the one who like gave an entire fucking speech about how they had evidence of WMDs and all that blah blah blah. He's one of the, along with Bush and Cheney, one of the people most responsible for those deaths. In the same way that like the high-ranking Nazis were responsible for the Holocaust. You know, he was a huge force behind the legitimization of the invasion. He was intimately involved in its planning. Everything to do with it. It had everything to do with him. So for these people to fucking come out and eulogize him, there's no way to spin it other than the fact that they are simply disconnecting the position and their admiration for like liberal formalities from the actual actions, their admiration for the myth of meritocracy from what those supposed merits, people with merit actually do, and their callous disregard for human beings, especially non-white human beings and non-American human beings and non-Western human beings. The 500,000 minimum people who Colin Powell killed along with his cronies doesn't even factor in for them. It's absolutely absurd. Yeah, he lied before the fucking UN. He lied about everything. And even if he wasn't lying, the invasion was still completely unjustified, illegal bullshit, okay? That's another thing. The Iraq War was unjustified bullshit. I don't fucking care if Saddam had WMDs. The US has WMDs. We're going to invade the fucking US? I mean, I could go on a whole rant about how the hysteria about like North Korea, Iraq, Iran, etc. having nuclear weapons is bullshit because it's a very important preventative measure. That's why they have and want them. And it's like, oh, so the US can have WMDs as a preventative measure? Despite the fact that the US is at a much lower risk of actually being invaded, and that the US would be the one invading these countries, yet the countries that are US enemies aren't allowed to have them. On top of that, if they don't have them, like, it's a justification to invade them and murder hundreds of thousands of people in those countries. Ha 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 ha. But yeah, the way that, like, these absolute abominable war criminals and genociders get eulogized in the US and depoliticized in the same way that George W. Bush has been turned into like a wholesome painter guy is absolutely disgusting. And it really shows you how little Americans of all stripes give a shit about the rest of the world. That these people were not only never brought to justice, but they're still venerated in death or in life by what is honestly the vast majority of Americans. And absolutely like practically all of the mainstream media, all of the mainstream every all of the outlets that decide what people think. Fuck Colin Powell. He should have been in jail. Same for George W. Bush, Cheney, Kissinger, Obama, Clinton, both of them, every other US war criminal you could imagine. But none of them are ever going to be in jail. And they're going to be depoliticized into like great, amazing American achievers. Many of them already have been, like their crimes don't even register. If Powell, like Mr. Iraq War, is being eulogized by supposedly progressive black politicians, that means that those people are gonna, like, who were abominable human beings as well, but who did even less, but who did less abominable things than him, but still many abominable things, aren't even going to register as having done abominable things to these sorts of people. Americans will never be held to account by other Americans. That is a simple fact. It's never going to happen. I'm done dreaming about it. I'm done thinking that the American left is ever going to change anything about this status quo. These are the sorts of candidates that, like, the you know, vote Biden, vote blue no matter who people want you to vote for. This guy, the supposed progressives who are still all in on US imperialism,